All right, we're getting down to the notes for towards the end of the year. This is after your homework check, and we're going to do another circle property. This has to do with some of the segments in a circle and not so much with the angles, although there may be angles possibly involved. So I want to I'll come back to this page and do some examples, but I want you to pause the video and get out your yellow paper that has all the properties on it. Go ahead and pause this right now. And when you pick it back up, you can find some space there in the middle of the back. We already have our two main formulas for length and area. Now we're going to talk about chords. And it says right here, segment. That segment is talking about the shaded. This piece right here is called a chord. So a chord is just a segment in a circle. And so if you made a circle here and drew a segment, that's a chord. And it's spelled like a musical chord. It's not a chord. So if that's the center of my circle, our main property has to do with when we draw a radius that is perpendicular to a chord and what it does to the chord. So it bisects the chord, and it is also, so it's perpendicular and it bisects both of those things. And it's going to create some congruent triangle things here. So that's the short of the story. There's some more detail, but to be able to do the problems, you need to realize that you're going to have right triangles there, and then there'll be some strategies that go with it. I'll show you an example that sometimes we call this the bow and arrow property, because if you look at all of these bows and arrows, you can see, and this is almost a circle. It's not quite a circle, but there would be a chord right here, and the radius would be going from the person there. So the radius is perpendicular to the chord. This one's not quite perpendicular, the angle there. But you can see that if you look at when they're shooting a bow, the arrow is not all the way up here. It's right in the middle. So it bisects. So we have symmetry. We have congruent triangles there. And you can tell by looking at it when you have that. So the radius that is perpendicular to the chord bisects the chord. So here's your strategies. And if you get this paper out, I'm going to give you the strategy. There's really 4 different kinds of problems. Every time, write the radius. So as soon as you see that you have the radius, copy the radius wherever it's at. Okay, sometimes that's going to be more information you need. Sometimes that's going to be less. And you have to find something. But I see a radius here is 4. I see a radius here is 4. That just happens to be my answer there, x equals 4. But I also see a radius right here. This is the key. That radius is 4. I don't need it for this problem, but I'm going to need it later on. So I have every radius in every circle is equal. That's how you make a circle. So I write down every radius, see what happens. Okay, these are all pretty easy. And these first couple. Write the radius. Radius is 9. Radius is 9. Radius is 9. Radius is 9. Got it. That's equal to 9. I don't have a radius here. I could write that's equal to 9. That's the easy ones. Okay, let's go to the second one. Let's follow your same rule. Do you see a radius? If you see a radius, write it in. If there's 3 of them, write 3 of them in. 11.2, 11.2, 11.2. So if this whole thing is 11.2 and this much is 6.6, I can subtract to find out this little piece outside right here. Again, that comes from writing the radius on your circle. Okay, and you'll see we have these right triangles here. We'll be able to find other missing sides as well. Okay, so put in the radius every time. Go to number 4. Got the radius. Got the radius. Need to write the radius here. Need to write the radius here. So this time they give me this outside piece as 10.5. I need to find x. The whole thing is 19.8 minus 10.5 gives me 9.3. Okay, so again, write the radius, pretty straightforward. Okay, number 5. This is where the bow and arrow idea comes in. If you don't have the bow and arrow on your paper here, you can sketch it in. So I'm going to put in another right triangle because there's symmetry here, and these things are congruent. So I have 8.9 here, 8.9 here. Follow your rule, write the radius, write the radius. Now I can look at this picture, and I have a right triangle, and I'm going to find x. So x squared plus 8.9 squared equals 10.3 squared. And Pythagorean theorem, just make sure your longest side is always the radius. You can subtract, do your math, hit pause right now, calculate that, and get 5.2. Okay, same thing over here. They already have my triangles drawn in. Write the radius, write the radius, write the radius. That's equal to 14.4. This is 14.4. Again, Pythagorean theorem. X squared plus 14.4 squared equals 17.8 squared. I'm assuming you can do Pythagorean theorem 10.5. Okay, the last two, the hardest ones on here. Write the radius, write the radius, write the radius. You might say, well, I already have the radius. There's no other radius. Then draw one in. You do not see a bow and arrow here. You need to make it. We want to see that bow and arrow. There's your arrow. There's the bow. Curved like that. Here's your chord. So now I can fill in everything. 15.1, 15.1, 11.9, 11.9. I think it's worth writing both of those in there. So what do I need to find? Well, I need to figure out x. X is not inside, so I can't figure it out. I have to come up with something else first. I need to know what this little thing is right here, whatever that space is. So if I ignore that x, I have a right triangle here. You can call that y if you want, or z, or question mark. Question mark squared plus 11.9 squared equals 15.1 squared. So I can do my Pythagorean theorem. That'll be 15.1 squared minus 11.9 squared. Take the square root of that. 9.3. So my question mark is 9.3. This is why we write the radius, write the radius, write the radius. If this is 9.3 and the radius is 15.1, I can take 15.1 minus 9.3. And I get my final answer, like 5.8. Okay, so follow your steps. Make sure you have the bow and arrow. So let's go to number 8. Don't have the bow and arrow. Write the radius, write the radius, write the radius. 11.5. Again, I need to find this triangle. I need to solve. I can always solve this triangle. I can put a different and call that h if I want to. H squared plus 11.5 squared equals 12.8 squared. So I can solve for h. 12.8 minus 11.5, square root of what I get, 5.6. So if the radius is 12.8, take away 5.6, 7.2 is my space out here. Other things that you could be asked is to find the area of a triangle here. Well, you know, if you want to find the area of the whole thing, you know the base, you know the height. But the whole key is write the radius, write the radius. On the back, there's 8 more problems that practice this. Plus, in my class, you have the Khan Academy to work on. That's it.